Hey, welcome back, everyone. All right, some big news. Actually, some stuff confirming what we've already been talking about, which is Trump is really signaling a pretty big shift away now from the GOP, including with some new cease and desists he's now sent them. We're gonna be going into that and the real significance of that going forward, what it means for the Republican Party, what it means for how Trump is impacting the conservative movement and the Republican Party, and kind of where things are heading with that. Also going to be going into some other stories, tech censorship, some of what's happening right now in the border. A lot of stories to go into. And folks, good seeing you all here. Hey, Robin M., thank you as well. Thanks for being here. Serena Lane, thank you. Ron Keene, thank you. Yeah, Stacy Mayer, hello from Texas. How you doing? Good to see you all here. All right, so always enjoy doing these, folks. Roseanne Dunn, California. Good seeing a fellow Californian here. All right, that said, let's jump into the first story for the night. As always, if you have questions, leave them in the chat. I'll try to get to them. All right, so first story tonight, interestingly, it says here, this Epoch Times. President Trump calls on GOP to stop using his name for fundraising. All right, get this. It says on Saturday, lawyers representing President Trump sent out cease and desist letters to the three largest fundraising organizations for the GOP. Those are the Republican National Committee, the RNC, the Republican National Congressional Committee, and the National Republican Senate Committee. All were informed of President Trump's disapproval and were asked to halt future marketing. Now, why does this matter? Now, remember when Trump was talking about, or rumors were saying Trump might start his own political party? And remember how, again, there was the Patriot Party claim that Trump was now part of the Patriot Party. Trump disavowed it. Well, Trump doesn't need to start his own party. And this is what he's demonstrating right now. Trump is subverting the Republican Party. He's changing the party. He's making the Republican Party into his own party. He's not creating his new party. Right now what he's doing is by setting up. Remember, we talked about during the speech at CPAC. I mentioned really the most important thing he announced was DonaldJTrump.com, his new PAC, right? What he's doing by doing this is putting his PAC in direct competition in terms of fundraising with these three big GOP ones: Republican National Committee, the National Republican Congressional Committee, the National Republican Senate Committee. Basically, what Trump has done, he's set up his own PAC, which means that he is now the one basically directing the party. The future of the Republican Party now is really with Trump. And these organizations were advertising with Trump, using Trump's image, using Trump's, kind of message in order to get people to donate to them. Trump sent them a cease and desist saying, stop doing that. Stop using my likeness. Basically, you no longer represent me. That's basically what he told them. And by doing that, think of the significance of that as well. If Trump's basically saying that the Republican National Committee, these other organizations that are the top GOP fundraisers, that they're no longer able to basically represent Trump, what does that mean for the GOP itself? What does that mean for the Republican Party itself? Now, I've actually seen a lot of people, including somebody in the chat, mentioning that, you get letters in the mail or emails asking you to donate to the GOP or Republican National Committee or different ones. And a lot of people are writing back, no. I've seen people send back Trump $20 bill, like joke dollar bills. Really, I think a lot of Republicans and conservatives are disenfranchised with the GOP right now, especially with what happened during Trump's last days in office. And by making this move, right? By making this move, Trump does not need to start his own party. He does not need to go head to head with the GOP and basically try to run a third party. He doesn't need to position himself like the Tea Party. He doesn't need to try to register a new party and deal with what basically the Obama administration's IRS did to kill the Tea Party. He doesn't need to deal with any of that, which means that all the controversy he'd be facing had he gone that route, and all the different types of pressure he'd get had he gone that route, he can avoid. And what he's doing, again, is just basically creating his own PAC fundraising organization, and again, pushing his own candidates through the Republican Party, and he's subverting the Republican Party. He's changing the Republican Party. He's making it his party. That's what's happening right now. All right, another quick story here on this. There's another story. Trump vows to campaign against Senator Murkowski in 2022. It says here, former President Donald Trump reportedly said on March 6th, reportedly, so not totally confirmed, reportedly said on March 6th that he will campaign against Senator Lisa Murkowski, a Republican from Alaska, in 2022. And he said, quote, I don't know where other people will be next year, but I know where I will be, in Alaska, campaigning against a senator. He said this in a statement obtained by various news outlets, allegedly. The former president appeared to be frustrated with Murkowski's Murkowski's vote for Representative Don Holland, a Democrat, President Joe Biden's pick for Secretary of the Interior. And he said, quote, her voice to advance radical left Democrat Deb Haaland. He's using his nicknames again. We didn't really see him use his nicknames as heavy during the last election. During 2016, he was real heavy on nicknames. He's doing this again. Democrat Deb Haaland is what he's calling her now. For Secretary of the Interior is yet another example of Murkowski not standing up. Now, not going too deep into this, but what does it mean here? It means that Trump is already beginning to push the narratives for 2022. Trump is already starting the debate for 2022. And remember, now Trump has his own PAC, DonaldJTrump.com, his own PAC, which he's using to subvert the Republican Party. At the same time, he has his other organization, Office of the Former President, which he's using to campaign, using to basically try to overturn the House and Senate back to the Republicans, as he said, and also engaging in grassroots community organizing. Through these two different methods, Trump is one, subverting the Republican Party, and two, pushing his own candidates, getting behind them, and so on. Trump is already starting this. Technically, this isn't for a while that we'd have to be talking about the elections. Trump is already starting this. And keep in mind, campaigning is not just for the sake of getting an official into office. The significance of campaigning when it comes to the American discussion on politics is not just about the candidate. It's about the issues. It's about the issues that affect, future government, integrity of government, problems you see in government, and so on. And by campaigning on these issues, Trump will be both pushing his message. He'll also be exposing officials within the Republican National Committee and GOP and so on who don't represent the interests of Trump supporting conservatives, who are really the body of the Republican Party, as well as libertarians and others. And while at the same time achieving the goal he has of basically, again, overturning the House and Senate. He's well on his way to doing this. And really, this ties together interestingly. I'll be keeping you all updated on this going forward, too, because really, I think we're going to be seeing a lot of action with this. And real quick, there's a real funny element that we're going to watch playing out, which is, I'll tell you all from a journalistic standpoint. Biden doesn't make interesting headlines. He doesn't really get traffic. Remember, Trump was half joking with a lot of the media that, he's like, they love me. They like to report on my news. I'm the one keeping them afloat, basically. The attention media got from Trump, pro or anti-Trump content, was huge. A lot of people wanted to read it. Everybody was looking for it, whether you were for him or against him. A lot of the media hit pieces, right? New York Times, Washington Post, so on. They had a lot of coverage on Trump every single day. Trump was the biggest story in the country every single day for the last, 5 years. Now you have Biden in, and pretty much, he has kind of a far left socialist policy, which some of it's pretty extreme. And you have then the media basically trying to toot their horns and everything he does, like, go Biden, right? They went from being all anti-Trump all the time to 100% anything Biden says or does is the greatest thing on earth. A lot of them. And it's just not that interesting, to be honest. People don't seem to be that interested in it. There's no drama, right? They're used to that. And so what's going to happen? Trump is now re-emerging on the scene. Now, if he publishes videos on YouTube, as we saw the CPAC video, you may get a strike, which means if you get 3 strikes, they delete your channel. And at the same time, they're removing the content anyways. This is going to leave the different media outlets in this country with a very unique, say, conflict, which is They can choose to, once Trump reemerges on the scene, which he's now doing, they can choose to either cover the things he does and deal with the fact that very likely they're unintentionally supporting what he's doing by covering him. And because people want to read the news on Trump, they're going to be looking for that content, or they choose to not cover him. And if they choose to not cover him, what happens? It means that the only media talking about him are going to be independent outlets like this one, for example, which means that they're in a very funny position. Either they support Trump unintentionally and give attention to what he's doing while not being able to lie like they used to, because Trump is no longer president of the United States and as a private citizen now has additional cover, additional rights, right, that you and I have as private citizens. While at the same time, if they go the opposite way, they're going to drive traffic to their competitors and people they don't want to get traffic, like Epic Times, for example. Independent voices who are reporting on these things. This is going to be the conflict a lot of these media are going to have to face really soon. And really, it's going to be very interesting to watch how this plays out. All right, folks. Again, I mentioned before, this show is totally demonetized by YouTube. We'll have to see what happens. We are trying to get our advertisements restored. We'll have to see. But folks, we do have a sponsor for tonight, and big thanks out to them. It's shenyundancer.com. And Shenyun Dancer is a clothing line from Shenyun. You might have seen the advertisements. This Chinese dance and performing arts company. They do great, great stuff. Those of you wondering, they're New York-based, not China-based. Hopefully they will be allowed into China one day. Currently, they're blocked because, well, they're presenting culture the Chinese Communist Party's been trying to destroy. And they also happen to have a very good clothing line. Now, real quick, Shenyun Dancer apparel is markedly different from what is trendy today. Every feature, including the fabric, color palette, style, and cut, bears the distinct aesthetic of Shenyun. Shenyun Dancer clothing provides men with a classy, distinguished, and timeless look, great for everything from the office to the street. Take their polo, for example. While most polos are great for either the golf course or a backyard party, they might not be dressy enough for the office. Shenyun Dancer makes a comfortable and versatile long-sleeve polo in a classic cut. Woven trim in the cuffs and collar at a classic finish to a shirt design to impress. And actually, I'm wearing one right now. I do find it quite comfortable. Actually, they're quite nice. I have two of them right now. So highly recommend them. They are actually really good. If you're interested, you can visit shenyundancer.com and you can get 10% off your first order if you use the promo code JOSH10, no space. All right, JOSH10. All right, folks, that's it. Let's go into a few questions, then we'll go into some more stories. Let's see here. This is from Milton Pere Gentil. He said, "Hi, Josh. Where can I find Mike Lindell's documentary? Thanks beforehand for answering." So Mike Lindell made these documentaries about election fraud. And of course, as you would expect, they got one deleted from the internet, from YouTube and so on. Heavily censored. He was deeply attacked by it. Cancel mobs came after him. And, he's getting cease and desist letters from these voting companies and so on. Last I saw, you can still find his videos on BitChute. And so you can go on BitChute and look for them. I don't have link. You're mentioning as well Rumble. Yeah, so you can also you can still find it on Rumble if you were mentioning it here. I did find it there. I watched it. I found it to be very interesting. He does a lot of interviews with some pretty interesting people, pretty credible folks. I think it's worth looking at. Of course, draw your own conclusions. I think it's worth looking at. Yeah, someone mentioned too, it's on his webpage. So if you're interested, check it out. Actually, on that note too, some of you have asked, Josh, can I watch Crossroads on any other platform? We are actually on Rumble. And so if you don't like YouTube, you can watch us on Rumble as well. They unfortunately don't have live function actually, I think they might have just launched it. To check on it. We haven't been using it for the lives because they haven't had live function. And of course, most of you all are here. So we're still doing lives here. But you can watch all of our shows as well on Rumble. So if you don't want to support YouTube, you can still check us out on Rumble. This is from Buck Browning. You said, "Are we more free or less free after 4 years of Trump?" I think Trump was like a speed bump. And we'll see if he gets back in. We'll see what happens. I do think Trump is having a big impact on changing things. But Trump's impact, during the say, trajectory of the last 4 years was really for, I think, the establishment, for the globalists. I think they see him as like a speed bump. He slowed them down. He reversed a lot of what they'd done. He changed a lot of things. Of course, now the Biden administration, they've reversed everything. They're trying to reverse everything. I shouldn't say he's a speed bump. He's done a lot more than that. All right, let me explain this a bit. Basically, you had this agenda being pushed, not just by the Democrats, but by the Republicans as well, these establishment groups, not just in the United States, but actually around the world. There was people in power, not in the U.S., not just in the U.S., in China and Iran and parts of Europe, Latin America. A lot of these politicians were really working hand in hand together, as we've now seen. And there's a lot of corruption behind the way, for example, foreign aid is given, a lot of corruption behind the way business deals are given, and how government officials, profit off business deals through investments and so on. How policy and business go hand in hand, all these corrupt systems that work throughout our system, not just in the United States, but around the world. Trump basically threw a wrench into that whole machine. And by doing so, he showed the whole world how these things actually work. By doing that, Trump changed the discussion on politics. By doing that, Trump showed the idea. I mean, this is my opinion, right? Trump showed what it looks like when leaders care about the people they lead. What it means when leaders, for example, care about their own countries. I know this was framed as nationalism or populism and so on, which has really been made into a bad word these days. But really, what's wrong with officials caring about their own people? And after taking care of their own households, so to speak, begin benefiting other countries through the goodness that they can create internally. Trump did that. And by doing that and by reversing the tides, so to speak, I think he helped people see the contrast between the way things could be and the way they were. Now, what we also saw was that the dynamics of the entire political system in the U.S. changed. The Republican Party, the Bush era guys, really merged with the Democrats. Really, the modern Democrat Party is really the merging of the classical Republican, or the older Republican Party, Bush era, and the Clinton era, so on, far left even, Democrats. And so you have this establishment party now under the Democrats, and you have this populist / patriot party, really, under the Trump movement. Now, once Trump was out of the picture, they seemed to try to bring things back to the way they were before. A lot of Biden's executive orders, more than 40 of them, very quickly in short order, I think much more now. Really what they did was rolled back everything Trump had done. They just reversed everything Trump did, threw everything he did out the window, got rid of all of it, so on, right? They reversed everything Trump did. And then the Republican Party under Mitch McConnell really tried bringing things back in order with the way things were before Trump. They try to pretend that Trump never happened, right? What happens? Trump says, no, I'm not getting behind you. You get behind me. And so Trump is still leading this movement happening that he started. Although politically right now, the establishment, I wouldn't even call it Democrats, but the establishment right now is trying to just roll everything back, bring it back to the old way of doing things. But the impact of Trump was such, and this is really, again, you're asking, are we more free or less free? The impact of Trump was that he made us aware of what it's like to, again, be free. He created the contrast where I think a lot of people felt the pressure but didn't realize the degree to which corruption had gotten into our system and how widespread it was, not just in the US, but in most countries in the world. And by rolling it back, he created not just, I think, a contrast between that, between the way things could be to some extent versus the way things were. But he also started a cultural change, not just in the US, but around the world. And that culture change is going to be difficult, if not impossible, for them to undo. Really, I think that what Trump did, the broader implications of his impact are really something that are still going to be changing, not just the United States, but really the whole world. And really, you're asking, after 4 years, look, let's put it this way, if Trump had gotten back in and there were 4 more years in office and he was again president, you would still see the same institutions trying to reverse and challenge everything he did. You'd still see the cancel culture mobs going against everything he did. You'd still see the media writing hit pieces on everything he did and making up fake stories every month or so. The way things were, the way they attacked him, the way they tried to undermine him, the way that Obama era officials went on tours around the world following Trump officials, very likely possibly violating the Hatch Act while doing so, meeting with some of the same folks that Trump had met with, to, it seemed to be the case, maybe encourage them to not move, that Trump is just a temporary slowing down of the global agenda that they're already pushing for. If it were 4 more years, that would have continued, and in 4 more years we'd be right back where we are right now. Just being realistic. What Trump is doing now, though, is interesting because he has started a grassroots movement, and it's grassroots movements, not just having people cheer him on like, hey, that's my president and so on, but getting people to go out and actually get involved in politics, get involved in campaigning, get involved with fundraising, going out and protesting, going to rallies and so on. That type of involvement and the constant exposure of unethical government policies is what changes the culture of a country. And so realistically, I think there's a lot of pressure on people right now, but realistically, what Trump is doing right now could have a broader impact on actually changing, I think, the culture in this country, and by doing so, change the culture in many other countries as well. It's going to be interesting. And I say that often, but really it's going to be very interesting to watch, and I'll be covering this a lot going forward on the show as well. Real quick as well, I got a nice letter. Where is it at? This is from Jerry Steinhauer from the UK. He's retired. He said, sent me some nice tea from the UK. I really appreciate it. He says, having served alongside American troops in both Iraq and Afghanistan, I am truly saddened at what was happening in the United States of America. The American people deserve better. Please continue to bring us limeys, he puts that in quotes, the truth. Yeah, thank you, Jerry. Really appreciate it. Yeah, and actually, folks, interesting note. I didn't realize as well how many international viewers this show has. Not on YouTube, I guess. I think a lot of YouTubers in other countries translate this show and others, including, like, I guess a lot in Afghanistan. Funny enough, I had no idea. A lot in Korea. All you watching in Korea, really thank you. Japan, India, Philippines. You folks are great. It's very encouraging. But again, this lends to the point I just made, that what this movement represents that Trump has done is not just a U.S. movement. This is an international movement, because it's creating a contrast, right? It's creating a contrast between what the American system started as. This is actually was told to me by one of the folks from Afghanistan, because they watched this show and others like it to learn more about the democratic systems of the West and kind of what went wrong with them, to be honest, right? This is really, he's highlighting what the system of government we have was, how it went wrong, and what can be done to fix it. And this is not just an American thing. This is not just a U.S. news thing. This is an international thing. Because the decline of this elected government system that we have in the United States, that many other countries have adopted, most countries have adopted now, I think is a fantastic system. I think it has done great things for the world. But I think through corruption, special interest, financial interest, and communist, Soviet, and socialist subversion has really been undermined. And part of the discussion that needs to happen, and I believe is happening, is how it was undermined and how it can be restored. And I believe that is now where the discussion is heading. And as much pressure as many people are under right now, keep in mind that many countries are going through almost the exact same thing. And the changes taking place on the culture level everywhere in the world are actually very similar. It's when you can see it from the whole picture, it's, I think, very interesting. All right, folks, going to the next story for the night. I'm talking a little bit about the Democrat agenda right now, because there's a few things happening. Now, first off, Democrats plant Obamacare midterm election traps for GOP and COVID-19 bill. And it says here, the COVID relief package before the Senate could contain an Obamacare trap, which will spring on the GOP as the midterm 2022 elections approach. One America's John Hines spoke to Doug Badger, a visiting fellow of domestic policy at the Heritage Foundation. Now, important thing with that was Trump never officially got rid of Obamacare. He got rid of the mandate, meaning the thing that says you have to pay or you're going to be financially punished for not paying. The question is if Democrats are waiting until 2022 to launch that. They're basically hinging their bets on the idea and the hope that Americans viewed that system as better than, say, the healthcare system we had before, which actually wasn't that expensive before Obamacare. Really, a household of 4 people could have gotten health insurance with, maybe couple hundred a month, depending on what plan you got before Obamacare. Whereas under Obamacare, you're looking to pay, double digits every year, for even fewer people. A lot of people who are middle class cannot even come close to affording Obamacare. And so they're hinging their bets, if this is true, on that Americans will get behind it, which may not work for them. Next year, we have Biden signs election executive order to increase voting by criminals. It says, and this is in addition to H.R. 1, which the Senate Democrats are getting ready to vote on, which is basically placing all the different changes to our election system that are made during the 2020 elections, making that mandated to the federal level. This is different what Biden's doing right now. It says President Joe Biden signed an executive order on March 7th, altering the way the federal government handles elections, including by increasing voting and voting registration access for criminals in prison and on probation. And it says here, quote, the order will direct the Attorney General to establish procedures to provide educational materials related to voter registration and voting, and to the extent practicable, to facilitate voter registration for all eligible individuals in the custody of the Federal Bureau of Prisons. This is according to a fact sheet that was distributed by the White House. Now, real quick here, there's a big question over what they mean by educational materials related to voting, not just voting registration, but also to voting. Because, again, part of the question would be how they're framing that, and also whether there's political bias within those materials. I'll get into this in just a bit. It continues, the order also directs the Attorney General to help former prisoners obtain appropriate identification to satisfy state voting requirements. Biden is also asking the U.S. Marshal Service to include language in its contracts to facilitate voting by mail and provide eligible criminals information on voting and voter registration. Now, we'll have to see how this actually goes in their favor. This is, you could assume that maybe they think that from a Democrat political standpoint, that maybe they think that criminals are more likely to vote Democrat for some reason. Hard to say, because really Biden and Clinton actually were the real tough on crime politicians going back a bit further. We'll have to see how this actually works out for them, whether this actually serves their interests, or whether, frankly, a lot of criminals may end up voting Trump anyway. I personally know reformed felons who are very big Trump supporters. And so giving them voting rights may actually not work in their favor, especially the more alpha types. They tend to like guys like Trump. I've known quite a few of them. We'll have to see. This is them basically changing election laws, trying to loosen things up. It seems to be the case, trying to get votes by doing so, if we view it from political interests and party interests. But we'll have to see how it plays out, because it may not go in the direction they're planning, honestly. And also here it says, another story, Biden says $1,400 stimulus checks to start going out this month. This is an article. It says President Joe Biden said the $1,400 direct payments to most Americans will begin going out this month. His promise comes after the Senate passed the $1.9 trillion COVID-19 relief package along party lines. Now, keep in mind, they're giving us our own taxpayer money back. This isn't the government doesn't just make money. The government doesn't have any profitable businesses. You and I are their profitable businesses. And so when the government gives you money, they're giving you back your own tax money, first off, right? Second, this is the crumbs of the multi-trillion-dollar COVID-19 bills they already put through, not just the latest one, but the one before it, which gave a whole lot more money to other countries than it did to Americans. Even in this one, only about 9% of the money is actually going to anything even slightly related to the virus, meaning they're taking money from taxpayers, huge amounts of money, and giving you back 9% of what they're taking. That is what this is. They're taking money from you and giving you back 9% of what they just took from you. And they're trying to say, look, citizen, look how the government looks after you, right? Now, of course, going back on this just a bit, Remember, Trump as well also wanted $2,000 for America. I believe I can't remember if it was 1,600 or 2,000 Trump wanted per American. I guess, a lot of people are hurting right now and so on. Things are not easy because of the lockdowns. The solution to that seems to be well in the works by states like Texas and others that are now joining in of just ending the lockdown programs. But for these folks, again, that's relinquishing power. I'll be explaining a bit of what's happening with this. And a lot of states don't seem to be interested in doing that. Now, at the same time as all of this, tied to what the Democrats are doing, what Biden's doing, this is another part of this to talk about. Representative Swalwell, you might remember the guy with Fang Fang, right? Sues Trump over alleged role in Capitol assault. And it says here, this is ABC News. In a lawsuit filed in federal court in Washington, D.C. Friday, Democratic Representative Eric Swalwell has sued former President Donald Trump and some of his allies, including his son Donald Trump Jr., Donald Trump Jr., personal attorney Rudy Giuliani, and GOP Representative Mo Brooks, over their alleged roles in the events leading up to and surrounding the Capitol assault on January 6th. In the 65-page suit, Swalwell, who was a House impeachment manager during Trump's second Senate trial, alleges that they all directly directly incited the violence at the U.S. Capitol by putting out a clear call to action, and some of the crowd responded to. And he claimed Trump directly incited the violence at the Capitol that followed and then watched approvingly as the building was overrun, according to the lawsuit. And the lawsuit also states, quote, as Trump was instructing them to go to the Capitol, insurgents were already forcing their way through the barricades, attempting to breach the building while blasting Trump's speech on a bullhorn. Now, taken as a whole, whether it's this story about Representative Swalwell, Biden's $1,400 stimulus plan, which had some really ridiculous coverage by Washington Post promoting it, actually. When it comes to Biden signing the election executive order for criminals, when it comes to Democrats claiming, trying to move this whole Obamacare move for 2022, allegedly, hasn't been fully confirmed. All this suggests something, which is this. This suggests that they're afraid of Trump being able to win still. It means that they're doing things still, very strong things, very strong actions, to one, go after Trump still, and to two, weaken the election systems still, which suggests, right? Which suggests that maybe they think Trump has a shot at things, which suggests that maybe they're afraid that Trump may be able to turn things around, and which suggests that they're trying to do anything they can, as Swalwell is demonstrating with this lawsuit, to shut down Trump, to silence Trump. And again, as I mentioned, that's probably not going to work. Not to mention the fact, as I talked about, that pretty much the media is going to play a big role in this, because the media is going to have one of two choices: cover Trump and unintentionally support everything he's doing and bring attention to it. Now he's a private citizen. Or two, don't cover Trump and let all the independent voices basically dominate the airwaves. They're not able, I think, to stop the movement that Trump started. And even the things they're trying to do to change the way systems are running, the way things are being done, you have a lot of pushback from different states, meaning that even from the state level and the election reforms they're trying to put through, states are very likely going to push back against that. It's probably not going to work for them. And two, really, I think the Trump momentum is very strong. The Trump momentum going forward is going to dominate the airwaves, as I just said. And again, they would not be doing these things, in my analysis, if they didn't think that he would have a serious shot at it. These are acts, it seems, more of concern than they are of legitimate grievances and so on. All right, some more stories here I want to go into. Now, another story says White House committed to working with Congress to check presidential war power after Syria strike. Remember how Biden bombed Syria just recently, right? Let's go into this just a bit. It says White House Press Secretary Jen Psaki said on Friday that the Biden administration is, quote, committed to working with Congress to replace the current presidential war power with a, quote, narrow and specific framework to ensure the government both protects Americans and stops endless wars. And they're saying, quote, according to Psaki, we are committed to working with Congress to ensure that the authorizations for the use of military force currently on the books are replaced with a narrow and specific framework that will ensure we can protect Americans from terrorist threats while ending the forever wars. Now, ending the forever wars while engaging again in wars like bombing Syria. Trump was trying to pull American troops out of the forever wars and was getting blocked from doing so by Democrats in the House and Senate. Now, if they really cared about ending the endless wars, would they have blocked Trump's attempts to pull troops out of Afghanistan and other countries? Would they have criticized Trump for example, trying to end the war in Iraq? Would they have done everything they could really to try to stop Trump from, getting other countries to play their role more in pulling American troops out of these countries? Would that have happened, right? Probably not. So what's the real motive here? Well, this ties into something else. Remember not too long ago, right? Remember when the Democrats just recently had this whole discussion where they wanted to remove Biden's, quote, sole authority to use military power? Remember that? And it was actually the Republicans who pushed back on that, saying they wanted to maintain Biden's ability to be the sole authority on nuclear launch. Why would they do that? If Democrats were if Democrats were really, on the side of Biden, why would it be them trying to remove his ability to have sole authority over launching nuclear weapons, while the Republicans of all people would want him to retain those powers? Well, very likely because of the same reason they're doing this, which is they're trying to change the way defense is done. They're trying to change these things, right? One sec. They're trying to change these things. And by changing them, what does that mean? It means that the president of the United States will no longer be able to, say, launch counterattacks as easily as before, depending on how they do it, because they haven't finalized it yet. That if the United States were launched victim of a surprise attack, such as by the Chinese Communist Party's Assassin's Maze program, which works by surprise attack, well laid out plan, 100-year marathon book goes into this as well. The Chinese Communist Party's plan for basically attacking the United States, if it ever came to it, to rely on that. How would the U.S. react? And would we be able to react quick enough in the situation where, that was needed? Well, if you have a bureaucracy blocking that from happening and has to go through several layers, then no. You can't respond same day. You can't respond immediately. It has to go through a bureaucratic process before retaliation can be done. Now, going back in history, Democrats mostly did this to our soldiers in Vietnam and in other wars, where, for example, if you were in Vietnam and you were getting hit by mortars from Viet Cong troops in the jungles, and you wanted to launch a counterattack on the mortar positions, you'd have to pick up the phone, make a phone call into headquarters, and get permission to fire back. And by the time you got permission to fire back, they'd already moved the mortars. And so basically, you couldn't fire back. You couldn't actually end the attacks. You couldn't fight back against the enemy because of the bureaucratic process that was formed. Same thing with a lot of troops with rules of engagement. Remember, Trump actually changed some of these rules of engagement. They have things like you can't shoot unless you're shot at first. And I'm sure many of you know that in warfare, typically the person who has the surprise, right? The element of surprise is the one who typically wins. It's actually amazing that American troops were able to do as well as they did despite all of these things. But they're trying to do this now from the presidential level, that even the president's ability to respond to foreign attacks in cases of war would need a bureaucratic process in order to function, which means that countries like the Chinese Communist Party that have programs for surprise attack and rapid attack, including programs, for example, to basically bring the U.S. to its knees within 2 weeks based on their strategy, that just doesn't work. And they would build strategies taking that into account as well, as the CCP has already done. And so programs like this are actually concerning, even though the narratives being used to justify it, ending forever wars, seem to be good, right? And it's very bizarre they're pushing for this right now. It brings up a lot of questions on why they're doing this right now. Real quick, this is from a few questions here. It's from Marie Pyle. You said, Josh, was your shirt black or dark blue? I'm actually wearing a dark blue shirt. You probably can't tell because of the lighting. Let's see here. This is from, go over a couple more questions. This is from Norman Rossell. He said, how long do you think will be until Biden hits the just walking about his underpants stage? I don't want to be mean. It wouldn't surprise me if he's already in that stage, to be honest. He doesn't look like he's doing so hot, but really, that may not be, for people who don't like Biden, that may not be a good thing, because really, Kamala Harris would become president if he were to leave. And you might remember some of the articles coming out before all of this saying that Harris was pretty much the furthest left politician in Congress when she was in Congress. And so, yeah, actually, Chris Farrell, you noted this as well. He said, would it be legal for Crossroads with Joshua Philipp to make book on the date that Kamala Harris will officially be sworn in as president of the United States, and on what date later on they will inform Biden? No. Yeah, honestly, if you think what Biden is doing is pretty far left in terms of policy right now, you would see it possibly much more so were Harris to be president, just being straight. At the same time, though, you can assume that Biden's not writing these executive orders. They're putting papers in front of him. He's just signing them. It's very unlikely he's even really reading them beforehand, because he's been signing a lot of them, and it's a lot to go through. Of course, who knows? We'll have to see. And we don't have people in his office watching how he's doing things, and so hard to say. Let's see here. This is another story to go into. It says Puerto Rico governor urges statehood and voting rights. Basically, I won't go over this whole thing, but Puerto Rico governor Pedro Luisi, calling for statehood for the island territory, urged the Senate, particularly those on the Republican side of the aisle, not to prejudge voters and to remember that Puerto Ricans are American citizens who should have the same rights as the people who live in the states. And he goes into this basically saying, how can you have people in the United States, technically because Puerto Rico is a territory of the U.S., who don't have representation in Congress and so on. Now, what does it mean when you see things like this typically? Usually means they're trying to start discussion and debate around it. And by starting discussion and debate around it, they can start framing the political alignment of these things. Now, going back, if we remember reading Trump's policies and Biden's policies, actually Trump did have Puerto Rico statehood within his policies. And Biden had creating a state in the District of Columbia, Washington, D.C. as part of his policies. Now, the Democrats are interested not just in creating a state out of Washington, D.C., but possibly Puerto Rico. Now, it's unclear why Trump wanted to make Puerto Rico a state. Maybe he believed that would benefit Republicans. Democrats obviously would very likely get new representation from Washington, D.C., because, well, it's Washington, D.C. is hugely Democrat-controlled. Now, why does this matter? It's because when you create a new state, you get new houses, you get new seats in the House and Senate. And so if they really do believe they can lose seats in the House and Senate, of course, they'd be interested in creating new states to grant them additional seats. And if they believe they can control things there enough, maybe it doesn't really matter who wins, right? Now, won't go too much deeper into that. Let's go into some more stories. I want to talk about the border, actually, because there's a lot going on right now at the U.S.-Mexico border. Now, a few stories here. I'll go over, then I'll tie it together. Now, this is from OANN. It says, proposal to block illegal immigrants from receiving stimulus blocked by Senate Democrats. A GOP-backed proposal to block illegal aliens from receiving, and that is the legal term for it, just so y'all know. A GOP-backed proposal to block illegal aliens from receiving stimulus checks was blocked by Democrats. Split by party lines, the amendment failed 49-50 in the upper chamber on Saturday. This came after several Democrats broke from their party to support a similar bill, but were shut down by Majority Leader Chuck Schumer, Democrat from New York. And Ted Cruz stated this, quote, the question for the American people to answer is, should taxpayer money be set? $1,400 to every illegal alien in America. This amendment provides that that stimulus checks should only go to American citizens or to people lawfully present. And also on this, Biden administration first in history to invite rejected asylum seekers back to reapply, according to the Texas sheriff. Now, Epoch Times reports this. A sheriff in Texas is voicing concerns that Americans will have to, quote, pay the price for the total chaos unfolding at the southern border. And he said this, This is the first time in U.S. history where the federal government has gone back on rejected asylee applicants in the last year or so, and they're reaching out to them to bring them back into the United States. As told to the Epoch Times by Sheriff A.J. Louderback. He said Biden's reforms have seen U.S. government employees contact asylum seekers rejected during the Trump administration and encourage them to reapply for asylee status under the Biden administration. And so what are they doing? People who were rejected their asylum status because they were deemed to not actually need asylum, to not be eligible for it, are being contacted now by Biden officials to reapply. And what are we seeing here between these two things? Well, on one side, they're creating incentives for people to enter the country illegally. Now, my position on these things typically is this: focus on the head of the snake, not the body. Focus on the root of the problem, not the fruits of the problem. You can look at the issue of, for example, illegal immigration in this country. I'd say most of them are actually very good people. I have some in my family, actually. Love the culture, to be honest, and I get along very well with many of them. In fact, some of my best friends are Brazilians, like Alando Santos, if you're watching. He's not an illegal alien, of course, but he's here legally on visa. He's a great guy. But the bigger picture here is don't focus, in my opinion, on the surface level issues. The issue is the policies that directed and the agendas behind the policies. What these individuals are pushing right now, What these individuals are pushing right now is a system basically to create a globalist open borders policy. Not only creating that, not only getting rid of all the protections on our basically border systems, not only, for example, eliminating the whole purpose of immigration law in the United States, but giving people financial benefit and financial incentive to break American law. Now, this is severely undermining a few things. One, it's creating a business, a very large business around human trafficking, a very lucrative business. And some of these individuals being trafficked are not even being trafficked under their own, will, because some of them, of course, pay traffickers a lot of money for it. A lot of these people are being trafficked against their will. In fact, I've personally spoken with sheriff deputies before who've told me stories about this. Individuals, for example, finding human smuggling rings, and getting punished because they exposed it, because it goes against the political interests rather than, for example, caring about human life in this case. And some people they found were not being trafficked, because they paid money. Some of them were being held like slaves. And this is not being talked about. They're creating this business, this illicit business that allows for these things and goes hand in hand with these things. At the same time, they're creating financial incentives and benefits to encourage people to come here illegally and to engage in this. They're removing legal systems within the United States that would deal with this and send them back or deport them. Typically, only if they commit crimes here would they be deported anyways. They removed that. While at the same time, really, going after Americans who try to criticize it. Now, what's happening here? This is the advancement, it seems, of the globalist agenda, these open societies, open border agenda. And basically, they're going to be pushing at it as hard as they can. Now, a few other points on this, though, some other stories. This is Epoch Times. It says Texas launches operation to combat drug people smuggling at southern border. And Texas Governor Greg Abbott, it says, launched a program on March 6th that would deploy state National Guard troops and personnel from other agencies to respond to the burgeoning crisis at the southern border. And Abbott says the Operation Lone Star, as he's calling it, in collaboration with the state's Department of Public Safety, will deploy air, ground, marine, and tactical border security assets to prevent Mexican criminal organizations from smuggling drugs and people into the United States. And he said, quote, Texas supports legal immigration, but will not be an accomplice to the open border policies that cause rather than prevent a humanitarian crisis in our state and endanger the lives of Texans. And he added, quote, we will surge the resources and law enforcement personnel needed to confront this crisis. And in a similar story to this, another part of this, it says here again, Epoch Times reporting, Texas State Representative introduces bill to finish border wall construction. And Texas State Representative Brian Slayton, a Republican, introduced a bill proposing the border wall construction initiated under former President Donald Trump be completed by the Texas Department of Public Safety. Now, I won't go too much deeper into this, but what are we seeing? A few different sides to this. One, this is again states breaking from the federal government. These are states pushing back on the federal government. Now, we did see this a bit under Trump. For example, the sanctuary city laws were very similar policies, where different cities or different states like California basically declared that they were sanctuary cities to the policies that Trump was putting through. You had many states refusing to enforce the policies of Trump when it came to deporting criminal, illegal aliens, people who committed crimes and were here illegally in addition to that, refusing to deport people because of their crimes. Now, you're seeing states do that again, but this time against Biden. And really, we're not that far, really not that far into the Biden administration. This is just starting, and already you're seeing a lot of momentum on this. Texas is pushing back very hard. Now, what does this mean, though, as well? I'd say there's two elements to it. On one side, you have states like Texas protecting their own personal interests, their own, state interests, right? Now, this does not impact the border crossings in, for example, California, Arizona, New Mexico, which would also be basically targets for this type of illegal access as well, right? Illegal immigration as well. Meaning that this is state interest. The state is trying to protect itself from these types of policies. Now, there are two different issues with this. One is that state interest versus national interest. But states, again, pushing back against federal laws they don't agree with, meaning states in some ways breaking off to an extent from the way the rest of the country is working. That may not be a bad thing in the way the U.S. is set up as really 50 different pseudo countries working together under a larger government, while larger government being the federal government. You have this kind of system in the U.S. The United States has a very unique system when it comes to state rights versus federal government rights and laws. It's a very unique system that does allow, again, for things like this. At the same time, though, what we're going to see, and what I think we will see a lot of, is other states following Texas's lead. Because we've been seeing this not just with Texas doing this. We saw this with Texas, for example, ending the lockdowns and ending the mask mandates, which many states have now followed. We saw this with Texas, for example, standing up against other laws. We saw it with Florida and Texas and many other states joining it as well, pushing back against big tech and their censorship policies. Really, we're going to see a lot of states basically forming their own pseudo-alliance within the United States, following each other's lead with policies and making changes like this. And you're going to see, I think, really two Americas spring up. You're going to see Biden country, and you're going to see Trump country, essentially. You're going to see states that hold on to one side and states that represent the other side. And really, this is where it's already heading and already pretty strongly at in some regards, right? Where states are breaking away from the way the federal government is doing things while holding on to the way things were kind of under Trump. And it's going to be, again, as I always say, interesting to watch going forward. Now, let's go over a couple questions here. This is from Chris Farrell. He said, why does the Epoch Times give Kamala a pass, this Kamala Harris, on her lack of constitutional eligibility to be legally sitting president of the United States, being that she is not an Article 2 natural-born citizen? That's actually an interesting point. I saw some of the arguments with that. Technically, it's complicated. I saw the articles on it. I saw the pushback on it. It seems to be the case that based on the facts and based on the data, you could argue that she should be ineligible to be president, and the evidence is there. At the same time, you have a lot of different news outlets saying it's fake news, and the way things are, frankly, right now is they're kind of creating their own reality. Let's just be honest. And if they control the institutions, if they control the Justice Department, if they control the House and the Senate, if they control all the major institutions in the U.S., we've seen already that the laws don't really matter when it comes to these elected officials. They kind of do whatever they want, And especially as well when it comes to especially as well when it comes to, again, what happens when the media is complicit within that disinformation, complicit within the false narratives they're creating. When the media is complicit within that entire show they're putting on, really, they can create their own false reality, essentially. And that false reality is what then shapes the country. And folks like me, they try to censor us and make sure we can't talk about it because, again, it is not in their interest to allow us to talk about it. This is from T. Mac Jr. He said, "Did you ever see Peter Navarro's documentary called Death by China, Confronting the Dragon, a Global Call to Action? I highly recommend it." Yes, I did see it, and I also highly recommend it. In fact, I don't know if it's still on Amazon Prime. It used to be. For anyone who hasn't seen it, though, I can't recommend it enough. Again, documentary, Peter Navarro, Death by China, Confronting the Dragon, a Global Call to Action. It's very good. Talks about a lot of the financial manipulation that the Chinese Communist Party was doing in the United States, a lot of the financial warfare tactics they were using, a lot of how Western systems were kind of complicit in a lot of this and what could be done about it. It's an older film, and there was a book with it as well, but a lot of it's actually still relevant. All right, it's getting a bit late, and so I want to jump forward a bit to a couple stories I really wanted to cover. I always end up having more to talk about than I can get to. I'm going to go over just a couple here because I think they're important to discuss. This is in New York. Get this. This is from Daily Wire. New Yorkers will have to show a COVID-19 passport to enter stadiums, theaters, businesses. And it says here, Democratic New York Governor Andrew Cuomo on Tuesday announced a new program that will require New Yorkers to show a COVID-19 passport to enter sports arenas, theaters, and other businesses. The plan establishes an Excelsior plan, which will use secure technology, right, to prove that a state resident has been vaccinated against COVID-19 or has had a recent negative test. Sites included in the rollout include Madison Square Garden and Barclays Center, both sports and entertainment venues. It says, quote, similar to a mobile airline boarding pass, individuals will be able to either print out their pass or store it on their smartphones using the Excelsior Passes wallet app. You're going to have an app that determines your freedom, right? According to a press release from the governor's webpage. Each pass will have a secure QR code, which venues will scan using a companion app to confirm someone's COVID health status. The program is already underway as the pass was tested at Tuesday night's New York Rangers hockey game at Madison Square Garden, the New York Post reported. Now, what is the significance of this? They're not giving us back our freedom. They're not ending the lockdowns. They're not changing things. They're not relinquishing the control they had, as I said that they probably wouldn't. Some states are. Texas, other states are also ending these things. Some states aren't. What they're doing here is instead of relinquishing the additional powers they created for themselves, they're creating new rights while maintaining those powers for us. In other words, freedom is no longer a right under this. Freedom is a privilege under this. You are not being given back your rights. Rights now under things like this are something granted to you by the government. And granted to you by the government in accordance on whether you're actually following the laws they put in place and following the requirements they put in place. And as well, requiring you to have a smartphone, which works, as someone mentioned here, basically your leash, to ensure that you're allowed to go outside, right? Like someone walking a dog, right? You're gonna have your dog on a leash. You gotta have your leash, your cell phone, if you want to go to certain places in New York under this. Now, in some countries, they're already doing this. In Israel, I know, for example, they're doing this. I know that one of the companies that is pushing this out, you can watch the interview I did with Representative Tammy Nichols from Idaho, where she mentioned during her interview that different companies are actually trying to push these types of technologies to governments across the United States. You have them trying to roll these out. And again, the problem here is rather than relinquish their controls, they are keeping their controls. But they are keeping their controls and then giving you a pass to get around your controls. Through this, again, you have no rights. You have no rights as a citizen under this. Well, they've taken away many of your rights. And by doing this, they've made it so that rights have become, again, just saying this, they become a privilege, not a right. Your freedoms are no longer a right, they're a privilege under this system. Now, I'm going to skip to one more because I wanted to mention this as well. This is an interesting story from the National Pulse. It says here, exclusive, Bill Gates Foundation funded genomics firm mining DNA data through COVID tests. And this is concerning because this is one of the big things that people in China were concerned about. After the Chinese Communist Party took Hong Kong, when they ended autonomy in Hong Kong, and they did these mass virus tests, that was the big concern you had in Hong Kong. A lot of people were concerned the Chinese Communist Party was collecting DNA data through these tests. And it seems now that there's some credibility to this. Let's go into this. Now, it says here, according to National Pulse, BGI Genomics, the Chinese Communist Party-linked genomics firm flagged by U.S. officials as mining, quote unquote, the DNA of Americans, has collaborated extensively with the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, the National Pulse can reveal. The company has recently come under fire following a 60 minutes expose on the company's use of COVID-19 tests to, quote, collect, store, and exploit biometric information on American citizens, according to former U.S. intelligence officials. What's more, a recent Reuters article linked the firm to the Chinese Communist Party's military. In addition to the Obama administration's enabling the firm to gain a firm foothold in the U.S., the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation played a critical role in BGI's American expansion. And concerning as well, because in New York, I believe it was Gates, was given some control over the virus response program by our mayor. And so you do have some of this stuff happening as well. Also keep in mind, if we go back just a little bit during the Trump administration, when, for example, information was coming out on Chinese biometric data programs, for example, these ancestry programs people do where you send your saliva in and they tell you what your ancestry is. A lot of those, the data for a lot of those companies is actually processed in China. And during the Trump administration, they had actually responded to that and made it so that U.S. military personnel could not use some of those services because of that. And why was that? As many people have noted, Epoch Times has reported, biometric data can be used to develop bioweapons. You can target bioweapons to specific DNA strands. And the full context of why they wanted to do that, why, for example, they made it so American personnel could not use these programs because of the DNA risks, was not really made totally clear publicly. But the Chinese Communist Party's military, tied to a biometrics firm, tied to, again, things being pushed in the U.S. under the Biden administration, tied to the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, I'd say it's a bit concerning. All right, folks, it's getting a bit late, so I'll end the broadcast for tonight here. As always, folks, we are demonetized, but I'm hoping to stay on YouTube. We're working on some other options. Hear us out. Stay tuned. We have some big announcements coming up very soon. But in the meantime, again, it does help us if you like and subscribe. Also tell a friend about Crossroads. It really, really helps us. So if you like this video, if you like these episodes I do, please do consider liking and subscribing and also telling a friend or family member about Crossroads. It really helps us. Some big announcements coming up soon. I won't say anything yet, but just get ready for some interesting stuff. As always, too, folks, I'm doing these live Q&As Sunday, Tuesday, and Thursday. And so I'll see you again this coming Tuesday, 10:30 p.m. Eastern Time. And also, please check out the other videos we're doing. We've been doing, for example, some really good interviews I think you'll enjoy. And I also have some special feature content in the works. I've been talking for a long time about this series on the history of communism that is in the works right now. Should be, we'll have to see, maybe a few weeks, but we're past the script phase of it, let's put it that way. And so it's moving along very well. Also, haven't forgot about the book list. We're going to be doing that also, but we want to do it as more of like a special feature thing. And I'll keep you all updated on that. Now, folks, as always, really appreciate all of you. I really enjoy doing these. Yeah, it's great. Yeah, thanks everyone. It's all good. Yeah, thank you. MW351, thank you. Let's see here. Linda Dudas, you said, thank you, Josh. Enjoy the show. Arthur Wagner, thank you. Yeah, everyone, really appreciate it. And thank you as always. All right. That said, folks, please check out the interviews we're doing, and also I'll see you again 10:30 p.m. Eastern time on Tuesday. All right. And that said, as always, please take care of yourselves, stay informed, and stay free. Thank you.